The CD-RW drive actually write data to the disk, erase it, whatever you want it to do. Just like with a CD, if you're going to pick a DVD drive, you need to pick a type. And there are many types. The first, of course, is the DVD-ROM, which is like a CD-ROM. It's just it can only read data, it can't write. If you wanted a recordable DVD, however, you had a plethora of choices. The first one was the DVD-R, DVD recordable. Later on came the DVD-RW. Like a CD, you can burn information, erase it, rewrite information, and so on. Enhancements were made, and you had the DVD plus RW. And in the last couple of years, we've seen DVD plus minus RW drives that allow either type of disk to be read or written to. With that, let's take a look at how we install a DVD in our PC building. Now, for them, I like with an IDE drive. Because it's an IDE drive, I have to set the master-slave relationship.
We're going to make this the master drive on the secondary IDE channel.
So the first thing we need to do is to set our master-slave relationship. That is done with this set of jumpers right here. This set of jumpers is slave, this set of jumpers is the master. Notice that it's already set to be the master drive. There is one other connector you need to be aware of, and this is this one right here. This is our analog audio connector. We're going to put a plug in here and connect it to our motherboard. What that allows us to do is to put a traditional audio CD in our CD drive and play that audio CD and have the music come out through our PC system speakers without really having to do much with the CPU. So let's go ahead and put this drive in the system. Now, what I need to do actually is remove a front cover from the case itself. You'll find that with the given case you might have 1, 2, maybe even 4 different slot covers that cover up each of these 5 1/4 inch drive bays. And again, depending on the type of case you pick, there may actually be a metal plate cover right there behind the plastic plate cover, and you might take that off too. If you find one of those, just grab a hold of a screwdriver or a pair of pliers and wiggle it till it comes loose. Then pop off the plastic cover and we're ready to put the drive in. I've already done that on this system. So I'm going to take my drive, and I found with CD drives it's usually easier to insert them from the than from the rear because they're so long. And I've selected this bottom 5 1/4 inch drive bay to insert the drive into. What we did with the floppy disk drive, I've got one hand over here with my thumb on the front of the case to tell me when the drive is at the right depth. And once I get that, get 4 fine thread screws and screw them into the holes to secure the drive in its place. Now that we have the drive physically installed in the PC system, we now need to connect all the different connectors. We need to connect connector, we need to connect the IDE interface, and we also need to connect. First thing we're going to do is work on the IDE interface. Remember we said that we decided this would be the master drive on the secondary IDE channel. I checked my motherboard edition, and this connector right here is my secondary IDE channel. So I've got my IDE ribbon, and I'm going to plug the first down here. Remember the IDE connectors are keyed, so you can't put them in incorrectly anymore. Be able to. Now I need to connect the other end of the cable into the drive itself. However, before I do that, I'm actually going to plug the drive end of my analog audio cable port right here. The reason I'm going to do that is because if I hadn't put the cable in first, over here it's going to cover that up and you're not going to be able to see it. So, in my box CD-ROM drive came in, I find my audio cable plug right here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this cable. Now you're probably saying, well, which way it goes? Actually, you know what? It doesn't, because all R is the right channel and a ground. So if you get it backwards, the only problem you end up with is that your left channel plays out of your right speaker and your right channel plays out of your left speaker, and it doesn't really make any difference. With that, let's go ahead now and put our IDE cable into it. Remember, with IDE, it doesn't matter plug you use as far as master and slave. We're going to use plug for this one.
We've got a red wire here indicating our pin 1 direction, and so I can't put it in backwards anyway. But the told you earlier with floppy drives also holds true with hard disk drives if you're ever in doubt. 99.99% of the time, in fact 100% in my opinion, the rear pin 1 is always closest to the power connector. Okay. And now our drive is our IDE channel. It's configured as the master drive on our secondary channel. Let's and apply power to it, and then we'll connect the other end of our audio cable. So I find Molex plug, the same plug that was used to connect our hard disk drive to power. Use the connector. I notice that so it can't be inserted back side down. Get the correct orientation and plug it into the connector. Our drive is ready to go. Let's go ahead and plug the other end of our audio cable into our motherboard. Now I checked board document and I found out that the connectors for analog right down here. Now there's actually two of them that you can see, a black one over here and a white one over here. Remember I said that there are multiple types of audio plugs that have been used over the years. This is a good motherboard. It has sizes just in case I've got the wrong one. With this one, I take the other end of my audio cable and I connect it into the black connector. I know my hand's in the way and I apologize for that. There's just no other way around it. And if I'd been smart, I would have actually done this before I put that expansion button. But with a little bit of skill, got our audio connector for our CD-ROM drive connected into the appropriate port. Now we can listen to our CD-ROM drive as well. At this point, our CD-ROM drive is almost ready to go. We do need to go in and enable the master drive on the secondary IDE channel system BIOS, but we're not going to do that just yet. Okay, we're almost done. We've got our motherboard in, we've got our CPU in, we've got our memory in, we've got our storage devices in. We're almost, however, there are still a few things left to do. Problem we've got right now, as it is, the fact that we have no way of communicating with that computer. We have no way of saying input the system and the hardware can process. To do that, we need to install input devices. These include devices such as the key, the mouse. Let's go ahead and take a look at the keyboard. Now, if you've used computers at all, you're already familiar with the board, right? We have a series of keys here, and magically they appear on the computer. How does it work? Well, the keyboard underneath all these keys has what's called a keyboard scanning chip. Basically what the keyboard scanning chip does is sit there and wait to see keys pressed. Like I just pressed the R key. The keyboard scans the fact that the R key was pressed and sends the R key through this cable into the motherboard, processed by the CPU, and then the CPU does whatever it is the operating program to do when the R key is pressed. Could be put the letter R on the screen, could be a menu shortcut, or whatever. When you're ready to connect the keyboard that you've picked out, locate the keyboard port right here on the back of the. Now these are called mini DIN connectors. There's two of them. The bottom one that's colored purple is for your keyboard. The upper one that's colored green is for your mouse. And this is what the plug looks like. All you have to do is simply plug it in like that. Not much to it. Now let's take a look at the mouse. The way the mouse works, I'm going to flip this over so you can see that there is a ball here. When we mouse, it causes that ball to. I'm going to take this cover off here. You have to get a little bit of lint to pop it off. You can see there's the ball in there. Now if I drop that ball out, there are different sensors. There's one right here and right down here. When the ball rolls inside here, also those sensors. As it rolls those sensors, it sends electric signal
through its core to the PC, which way is the mouse moving? And it's all based on the X coordinate system. Moving this way, or are we moving this way, or a combination of both? Changes in the XY coordinates are transmitted to the PC. It does what it's programmed to do with those inputs. Usually it moves the cursor on the screen a given amount. To connect to the PC system, this green connector right above the keyboard connector. Occasionally you'll come across a motherboard or case that doesn't label the mouse and the keyboard. Motherboards before where these two are black and you say, oh boy, which one's a mouse, which one's a keyboard? Generally, the lower one's the keyboard, the upper one is the... Now, most mice are color-coded. Notice that the keyboard is purple and the connected into was purple. Mice are that way too, except for some. For instance, this one. This one uses a generic silver and gray connector. But we know it's a mouse, so we can plug it in right there like so. Okay, making stellar progress. This PC system from a physical standpoint is all there. Everything's connected, it's all wired up, it's ready to be turned over. Before we can go ahead and install a system, there's still a thing we need to do, and that is to go in and enter our basic input-output system, or BIOS. Remember back when we installed our floppy disk drive, our hard drive, and our DVD drive, that we said that before we can use those, we actually have to go into the CMOS setup program, our BIOS, and configure various parameters so that the motherboard can with them. Well, that's what we're going now. What is the BIOS? That sounds like a funny name. The BIOS is actually a chip on your motherboard that contains a whole bunch of little teeny tiny programs that are used by the CPU to allow it to communicate with everything on the motherboard, that allow it to communicate with RAM, that communicate with the keyboard, allow it to communicate hard disk drive, that allow it to communicate with your floppy disk drive, and so on. Before you do that, you have to set up some parameters. The CMOS chip stores the parameters that the BIOS needs in order to communicate with these various devices. Every board has a special little program in the BIOS, the setup program. And when you first turn the system on, a little message will appear on the screen somewhere that press and then a certain key to enter setup. When you press that key, that little program is loaded out of the BIOS, and it allows you to go in and configure different parameters. You see it says press delete, and I press my delete key and my setup program comes on. Here's the current date and time. Now here's where I need to configure the type of floppy diskette I have installed in the system. By default, it was set to a 3.5 inch 144 megabyte drive. Common type of floppy disk drive in most PC systems. It's good. I'm going to hit enter, just like that. Notice right here that it already picked up my hard disk drive. Well, how did it do that? Notice right here under type, it says auto. When the motherboard was shipped from the factory, the motherboard manufacturer set all of these IDE types to auto. Now, auto means that the motherboard, when the system boots up, is going to go out and check for a master and slave drive on the primary IDE channel and a master and slave drive on the secondary IDE channel, and it's going to query any drive it finds to get its appropriate parameters. Notice we have our primary IDE master drive, the hard drive we installed, and notice that we also have our DVD drive automatically detected. I strongly recommend that you set each of these parameters to the type of auto. Let the motherboard and the hard drive determine the best configuration. If you don't, you'll have to configure the cylinders, the heads, and the sectors per track for each of the hard drives you've installed in your system.
How do you know what to put in there? Well, take a look.